I always throw people curveballs because I use PDF, InDesign and PDF. As much as an XML guy as I am, people are always amazed that I'm stuck on InDesign and PDF for my presentations. So it's highly ironic. Okay, so I'm here to talk with you about EPUB 3, which is the latest generation of the EPUB standard. And one thing I always like to stress with people is, yes, indeed, it is absolutely a milestone in the evolution of digital publishing. I like to point out that what a milestone is it marks a spot along the way. It's not the end of the road. There's a lot of road that stretches out behind this and ahead of it. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit about where we got to where we are, mostly about what EPUB 3 is about, but I've spent a substantial amount of time talking about where it's going, because I think that's really important for you to know that it's not just kind of now carved in stone, et cetera. So a lot of my comments are actually going to echo Evan's. For example, I've got an evolution slide as well. Most of you aren't as old as me, so you don't remember back in the 60s and 70s when there actually was lots of experimentation of putting textual content, including books. Back then it was on mainframes. And then the exciting 80s came along and we had CD-ROMs. Remember CD-ROMs? Now known as coasters. And then we had an earlier wave of e-readers back in the 90s, the Rocket eBook, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, a lot of the foundation of what we're working with today was actually laid back then because of the diversity of that environment. The open ebook standard was developed, which was the predecessor to EPUB. EPUB came out in 2007, ironically, almost simultaneously when the Kindle was introduced. The Kindle not being an EPUB compliant device, which is quite frustrating to the IDPF. We would have loved to have Kindle embrace the standard instead of going their own way, but they acquired Mobi and stuck with the Mobi standard. And then in 2010, that had evolved to EPUB 2.0.1, which is really what we now think of as EPUB 2. Most of the literally millions of ebooks that are out there in the world right now are in EPUB 2.0.1. But also in 2010, what happened was that the iPad was introduced, and that was another one of those watersheds that really changed the environment. The Kindle had done that for kind of text-based reading, but it was mainly good for fiction, simple nonfiction, etc. People with complex content like textbooks and cookbooks and scientific content, etc., really didn't end up making much use of EPUB 2. So it was very obvious that we needed a next generation standard that could address those kinds of things. So October 11th, 2011, at the Frankfurt Book Fair was when it was officially announced, EPUB 3. And I will say that this is only slightly tongue-in-cheek, because people really did think, okay, now, no, everything is fixed. Everything's going to work now, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. But what was the mandate for EPUB 3? What was behind the creation of this standard? Well, first of all, the mandate was that it had to be based on open standards, and it had to be royalty-free, had to support all types of publications. I almost always in these talks point out that it is not called eBook. It's called EPUB. It's really designed to be totally agnostic about the type of publication that you're publishing. Happens to come out of a book heritage, but the standard itself is very, very deliberately not specifically about books. Enabling multimedia and interactivity. Global language support was very, very important, because initially the early EPUB developments were all English language, largely in the US. It needs to be a worldwide standard, so it needs to handle Asian languages and right to left and vertical writing, etc. Accessibility, also one of the very, very fundamental mandates, and in fact EPUB 3 has been adopted by DAISY Consortium and NISO as the interchange format for accessible content is EPUB 3. So that, and a lot of the people on the DAISY Consortium, which is the international group really responsible for accessibility standards worldwide, not just online, or I'm not just talking about W3C standards, but for audiobooks, etc. Many of the key people from the DAISY Consortium were deeply involved, and still are deeply involved. Our CTO, Marcus Sterling, the CTO of IDPF, is the CTO of DAISY Consortium as well. George Kirscher, who actually is going to be here at SSP, I just saw him last week at BEA, and he said, oh, I'm coming to SSP this week, and then he leaves from here to go to Copenhagen. He travels like crazy with his dog Mikey. So if you see a guy with a dog, it's probably George. Wonderful guy. He's president of the IDPF and Secretary General of DAISY. So very, very close involvement in the accessibility community in developing this standard. Very, very fundamental. One thing that's close to my heart, because I come out of a design background, is good-looking design, layout, typography. That's one of the things that really frustrated me about that earlier generation of ebooks, is you just couldn't do much with them. And then it has to be backwards compatible with EPUB 2, and it's built to be extensible and modular. So, okay, now we can do all the cool stuff, right? Well, what cool stuff exactly? First thing that I think is most practical for most publishers, the first thing that they're going to benefit from is just the layout capabilities. The fact that you can have multi-column layouts, you can use real good fonts, real typography, hyphenation control, spacing control, runarounds, the kinds of things that more highly designed publications demand, and that the previous generation of EPUB really didn't let us do. The thing that most people first think of about EPUB 3 are these multimedia aspects, adding video, audio, animations, interactivity. There's two sides of interactivity. Obviously, anytime you need the user to do something, click on something and make something happen, you've got interactivity, but it's particularly valuable in educational space. Assessments basically are very, very important, and so the educational platforms that are being built, the two leading ones, by the way, VitalSource and CourseSmart, are both EPUB 3 compatible. The ability to have these scripted assessment, which are tests, quizzes, true, false, fill in the blank, all that kind of interactivity is very, very important in EPUB 3. One thing that's kind of often overlooked, but I think is a very fundamental value of this, is the fact that you can have multiple style sheets in one EPUB, and then you can do what's called responsive design, so that you can, it's using a feature called media queries, which is actually not an EPUB standard, it's a CSS3 feature that allows you to put in multiple style sheets and then have the use of the style sheet governed by the environment that the user's in. So that's what lets you open up a single EPUB 3 file and open it up on a laptop. You may see it in a multi-column horizontal layout. You open it up in a tablet, and it responds to whether you turn it to portrait or landscape, and you open it up on a phone, and you get yet another layout, all from one EPUB. Not a bunch of different EPUBs, one EPUB, multiple style sheets. It's not just that it's one EPUB, but it means that your content is only there once, and you've got one set of tagged content. Got multiple presentations, one set of tagged content. That's really fundamental. I mentioned in the global language support, actually EPUB 2 always had right-to-left reading capabilities, but it wasn't implemented anywhere. But now the EPUB 3 accommodates, Hebrew and Arabic languages. Also, the page flow and reading spreads, right-to-left spreads rather than left-to-right spreads, etc. And then vertical writing, which is needed in Asian typography. And one of the things I wasn't going to mention because I thought it was too technical, but Evan mentioned it, was Ruby, which is the ability to, those are basically cues to pronunciation that are added on to Japanese characters. That's inherent in the standard now too. So there's actually a huge take-up of this in Japan, Korea, a lot of people in that area on our working groups, the EPUB 3 working groups from Asia. So that's a key thing. We're not talking about English language content in Asia, we're talking about Asian content in Asia. Excuse me. Part of it that's close to my heart, because I was a subgroup lead of the metadata subgroup lead, is very rich metadata that accommodates a lot of existing standards. It's built on Dublin Core, but it accommodates actually two of the vocabularies that are built in, what are called reserved vocabularies in EPUB 3, are Onyx and Mark. So you don't need to declare those prefixes. You can simply use Mark XML and Onyx XML in your EPUBs. And then structural semantics, which is the ability to provide a uniform vocabulary for structures below the level that HTML, HTML5 naturally gives us. So, for example, knowing that a particular section is a chapter, or that a certain paragraph is an author name, or a footnote, or a section is a footnote, because a footnote can have complex content. It's that kind of semantics. It's a standard part of the EPUB standard that also happens to come out of a vocabulary from NISO and DAISY called ZAI, which is an accessibility vocabulary. So again, you'll see how the accessibility and the usability are meant to align. I wrote an article recently in a magazine called Publishing Business. It just came out, I think it was just last week. And one of the points I made in there was computers are print disabled. This is, for a long time I've been preaching that making your content accessible is good for your content in general. It's not just for people that are visually impaired. And I suddenly realized this is a good way to explain it, that the same things that you have to tell a screen reader, this is a list, here's an item in a list, now you're at the end of the list, first do this thing, then do this thing, then do this thing, you have to tell a computer all that stuff. Same things that you need to tell for making the content accessible makes the content more usable just for everybody and in every environment. One little very technical thing, but it's a really important one, is in the EPUB3 spec there's a new feature called CFI, which is canonical fragment identifiers. This is what gives you the ability to point to a location in an EPUB that doesn't have an anchor. It means it's fundamental for things like bookmarking and annotations, etc. So there's both a NISO activity and a W3C activity now working on interoperable annotations, interoperable bookmarking and notations, etc. So that right now you can do those things, but they tend to be proprietary within systems, and you can't get them out of that system and use it in another system or exchange it with another user. CFI is a component of that. It doesn't solve the problem, but it's a necessary piece of the solution. And then another one is the ability to synchronize text to spoken audio. It's called media overlays in the EPUB3 spec. It, again, comes out of the accessibility community, but where it's actually most widely used in eBooks is what's called read aloud. So for a kid's book, for example, it's what lets you highlight the book as the kid is hearing the book read and the words are highlighted in yellow. But it's also really useful for people that want to, listen to an audiobook as they're driving home in the car, and then when they get home, pick up where they left off, but read it in the text. The fact that you can sync those two is, it turns out to be a very useful thing. And then much more sophisticated text-to-speech capabilities with things like pronunciation, lexicons. An example I give is that we say EPUB, we don't say EPUB, but we also say XML, we don't say XML. And you have to tell a screen reader those things, because it needs to know this acronym I pronounce, this acronym I spell out. So it's got the abilities, an all standards-based ability to do that kind of stuff. So how does it do this? It's all based on open web technology. Fundamentally, it's all about HTML5. In the development of the standard, whenever we were verging on something that would veer us away from HTML5, we said can't go down that path. We need to stay aligned with HTML5, with basically how information is conveyed on the web in general. So it's XHTML5, which includes basically video. The reason I highlight video and audio is it means you don't need any plugins. There's no Flash, there's no separate programs that generate those things. You're using what's inherently part of HTML5 to embed video, audio content, etc. Cascading style sheets, SVG, which is scalable vector graphics, and one difference from EPUB2 is that in EPUB2 you could SVG images within your content documents, but in CSS3 they can be the content documents. That's very important for things like manga, graphic novels, comics, etc., where they can actually, the pages and the documents literally are SVG files. MathML is an important thing to this audience. It's fundamental, it's built into EPUB3. It's presentational MathML, not semantic MathML. JavaScript, which is where you get all the functionality and the scripting. Smile is the standard behind that media overlays that synchronizes the text and audio. I already mentioned Dublin Core for metadata. The two main font formats, OpenType being dominant in the print world, WAF fonts being dominant in the web world. So That's all really cool, right? Well, the objection I hear all the time from people is, wait a minute, though, but does it actually work anywhere? Well, guess what? The answer is yes. It does work somewhere. If you'd asked me that a year ago, I couldn't have been so blunt about just saying yes. Now I can say yes. iBooks, EPUB 3 compliant. Kobo, Google Play. I mentioned educational formats like VitalSource and CourseMark, both EPUB 3 compliant. In fact, those two have done some of the most advanced EPUB 3 implementations in existence right now. Lots of others are supporting it. The best one, the one that I typically advise people to use as a kind of a reference platform, is Readium, which is a plugin that you can get for Google Chrome. The reason that I say the best is that the catch is that not all reading systems implement all features, and not all features are implemented in the same way. So yes, we have a major comprehensive standard, but you do have to be aware that not all things that you do in EPUB 3 are going to work the same every place you use it. I'm chair of a committee for BISG, Book Industry Study Group, called the Content Structure Committee. One of our activities is publishing this EPUB 3 support grid, which basically documents all the different reading systems, and there's a gazillion of them, and all the on the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is all the different features in the EPUB 3 spec. And basically what we're doing with this grid is tracking which systems support which things in EPUB 3. So that's a real useful reference. Evan mentioned URLs. You'll notice lots of URLs. Don't try to write them down, but these presentations are all going to be distributed, so you'll be able to get all these URLs. So what do we mean exactly by it works? Well, at this point, that EPUB 3 grid means that the members of my Content Structure Committee are willing to say, yep, we can confirm that that thing works on that device. That's not really very formal. So one thing, it is useful, and it's updated frequently, so it's gotten tons and tons of attention. But the thing that I think is most important is that the next generation is being developed now. IDPF is developing what they call the EPUB 3 Compliance Test Suite, which is a formal set of fragmentary EPUB files that are designed to formally test out reading system compliance and report the degree of compliance back. So IDPF is already in the midst of developing that compliance test suite. Their plan is to partner with BISG to implement that as a next generation, much more interactive, much more real-time compliance testing and reporting mechanism.
What's IDPF?
International Digital Publishing Forum. I'm sorry, I should have, I'm throwing out all these acronyms. That's the organization responsible for EPUB. IDPF is it's an international organization, very broad-based, a lot of publishers, a lot of technology providers, reading system developers, retailers, all the biggies, almost all the biggies. There's one whose name starts with A that wasn't involved, but Apple and Adobe, the other two big A's, were deeply involved. Google was deeply involved. Barnes & Noble was deeply involved, et cetera. So it's a great group. So quickly, because I'm probably overrunning my time here, let me just run through some of the things that you can do right now to help get your EPUBs in shape, and so that you know some of the things that are happening in the future. The EPUB Samples project is really useful because it's just a big collection of correctly coded EPUBs that you can you can look at them and say, okay, how did they do that? And you can actually get the file, look at the coding, and see how that particular effect was achieved. EPUBCheck is what you use to actually validate your file. So when you've got an EPUB file, you send it to EPUBCheck. It reports back if it's in compliance or not, and if it's not, how it's not in compliance. So that's checking not just your content markup, but the container, the packaging, the metadata, all the pieces that go into making a valid EPUB. I already mentioned using Readium, which was a collaborative open source project that basically implemented all of EPUB 3 features in a technology called Webkit, which is the rendering engine behind the Chrome browser, the Safari browser, iBooks, et cetera. They're all, under the hood, they're all based on Webkit, which is an open source set of code. What Readium did is supply open source code for all the EPUB 3 features. So you can just simply download that plugin for Chrome. When you open up Chrome, you'll see Readium as one of the things, just like search, et cetera. You click on it and you see your library. So here's what's coming up. I mentioned that EPUB 3 was designed to be modular and extensible. The key thing that I like to emphasize to people is it doesn't mean that anything you do now is going to be undermined by what comes after. The whole idea was to create this standard in a way that we knew that there would need to be things added to it, but if we had waited for all those other added parts to be done, we still wouldn't have it out. And it needed to get out quickly. So we've got a platform, or we've got a fundamental standard that's designed to be augmented and designed to be refined as time goes on. And there's a link there to a place where the IDPF basically reports, here are all the ongoing projects that we've got. A couple of recent things that were done is we published a document on fixed layout metadata, so that the original standard is really oriented to reflowable content, but a lot of people need to do fixed layout in eBooks, so it does accommodate fixed layout as well. Advanced adaptive layout is mainly focused on things like comics, graphic novels, etc., where you've got regions that need to reflow and regions that need to be fixed, and it needs to adapt to the environment. There's currently an EPUB 301 working group. We're about half done with that work. The goal there is mainly it's just some clarifications to the spec. I missed a major inconsistency in the section I was responsible for, which was, it drives me crazy because I'm persnickety about stuff like that. So it's like, gotta fix that in the spec. And a couple of minor bug fixes, but nothing major. But the idea is that we're really setting the stage to be an ISO standard. And so the process is in place to get EPUB to be an international ISO standard as well. 3 working groups that are active right now. Dictionaries working group for dictionary and glossary content. Indexes working group for either embedded indexes or standalone indexes. One of the things that drives me crazy is the fact that so many print books that are converted to ebooks, the indexes are thrown out. It's like, oh, that's just tragic, because that's a huge intellectual guide to the content of that book or that content, and people think it's the same as search. It's not the same as search. So anyway, I don't have time to get into why indexes are so important, but they are. And then advanced hybrid layout. Recent advance for Readium. The Readium Foundation was formed, and again, this is outside of the IDPF, so this is an open source activity and very broad participation. What we have right now is what is now being called Readium Web, because it's browser based, but the Readium SDK is a software development kit that will basically create native code to enable people to use EPUB to make apps and platforms, etc. So it's not just about creating browser-based kind of rendering. This is quite an exciting thing that was actually just announced last week. I've been working with Pearson for about a year and a half, and under a very strict NDA, and it was just driving me crazy that I couldn't tell anybody about this. But they've developed a really fantastic infrastructure for, Pearson is gigantic and it's very complex content. They've got, both K through 12 and higher ed textbook content, and lots of complex textbooks in lots of disciplines. So you can imagine what this needs to accommodate. They've built an entire infrastructure on HTML5, and it's all integrated with EPUB 3. And what they've done is that they're proposing to offer their EPUB 3 format that's designed for educational content to make it publicly available. So they're teaming up with IDPF. There will be a workshop in the fall, kind of a working group that will be formed for people that are interested in educational content, textbook content, etc. And the idea is that it would be the first of many such profiles that would come out, like a profile for magazine content, a profile for textbooks, etc. This one would be called EduPub, and Pearson has offered what they've done as a starting point for that. So one of the things I want to close with is that it's not just about putting books in e-readers anymore. You really need to look at this format as it's an important format for delivering your content. Now, it's not well, I won't get off into that. It's a fundamental content for delivering your content, whether you're going to deliver it online or in an e-reader or create an app, and it's based on the open web platform. Little plug for people, if you're interested, joining the IDPF. BISG is a book industry group. I realize this is pretty much a journals crowd, But a little plug for those two organizations. So thanks. I think I went a little bit over, Marjorie. You were being very tolerant. So should we do questions later then? Or
Let
do you
me
want
see. May I see, how many hands are there for questions? Just 2. We'll take those 2 and then we have to move on.
And speak up a little bit, please.
First of all, did the committee codify which HTML5 elements, or is it fluctuating in the world?
You better repeat her question.
The first question is about, is it picking and choosing among the HTML5 elements? Fundamentally, that goes against what EPUB is trying to do. In other words, it's designed to let you do anything you can do in HTML5, you can do in an EPUB content document. So the idea is to stay in line with it. When people talk about HTML5, sometimes they mean the content markup, which is what it really means, but sometimes they also mean CSS3 and JavaScript, etc. There are limitations on the CSS3 side of what modules within CSS3 can be used in EPUB.
And just, do they standardize on any image or video formats?
We had standardizing on video formats. You obviously know this stuff. That was a huge debate within the working group because there are really 2 leading formats. One is called H.264, which is what's mainly used for video, and another is called VP8, which is not royalty encumbered, which actually people don't realize that H.264 is. So we ended up on the group ending up saying we have to be agnostic on this because in order to stay in line with HTML5, we can't specify one and then have HTML5 go in another direction. So basically EPUB3 says any video that you can legally use as HTML5, you can use it in EPUB. Which means that people often put 2 formats in their EPUBs because some readers use one and some readers use the other.
Okay, so Evan's question and that's it.
Okay? Evan?
The MathJax community is very upset right now because it looks like Google is going to pull MathML from the next release of Chrome. Have there been any discussion of that in the EPUB community?
I have not heard that.
Okay.
And they've been one of the main supporters of EPUB, and MathML is a fundamental built-in standard as part of EPUB. So
I'll forward you some of the documents.
yeah. I mean, certainly Readium is, not only is Readium all about, does Readium include MathML, it uses MathJax.
Yeah.
So, and the main contributor to Readium was Google.
Yeah.
So maybe they're saying, well, if you want to use MathML, you need to use Readium.
I'll send
I
you
don't-
the correspondence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill, very much.